over that whole thing. We have a project, a 500-unit project down in Fremont, and we're going through this right now with the board and the attorneys because they're 35 years old, and you've got guys that don't want to replace their deck boards, or they go on the weekend to replace it and they put it over decayed framing, or everybody starts replacing them, and all of a sudden you start getting a zillion requests for framing repairs, and it's not in your budget. And it's a real tough. That's a real tough one that the attorneys, when they drafted the documents, weren't thinking all the way through. So a lot of the things that we can do on like joist replacements, there's flashing tapes and things you can put over these now, so where the boards meet when you put the deck boards on, you don't get the dry rot on top of these. And particularly if you have association where the association is actually responsible for the wood framing that holds it up, and the homeowner is responsible for the walking surface. This works really well because this is typically what we find when we get into these things. The deck looks okay, you get 2-inch boards, it's pretty thick, and then you pull it apart, and there's all kinds of mold and mildew and dry rot. And, decks are a big expense, and associations spend a lot of money on. Yes?
I might add, we have a lot of decks, okay? And some folks want to use Trex, okay? So here's what's the problem with the Trex and most of them are. They look great, they cost a little bit more, but they stain, and once you get a drop of grease on them, that's it. You never get it off. Unlike wood, where you can sand it out, you have a barbecue in the back, and you start dribbling them around, you're going to live with that dribble the rest of your life.
I agree.
That's a big drawback.
Yeah, and that's why I said when you look at the composite products, you need to look at all the pros and cons with them. And Trex actually had a pretty substantial manufacturing problem out of their Sparks plant, and I had one of the failed decks, and I had to go through quite a process, even though we sell a lot of it and everything else to get my deck replaced. But you're right about the grease, and you're right about the staining, and it's a huge problem. The other thing about the Trex too is over the years they found the product expands and contracts a lot. So when we installed these originally, they used to be a lot closer together, and what happened was out over a couple of years, because there are wood particles in it, they expand, it actually created a solid surface on some of them. So Trex had to pay us to go back on several associations and replace the decks because the boards were too close together. And now they have pretty wide spacing.
It's better to have some space so the water doesn't lay in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so it's a big issue. But the man-made products, the AZAC's probably the new one that's out that doesn't have some of the issues that Trex has, but it hasn't been out long enough, so I'm still on the fence whether it's going to be one of those things. And after having a Trex deck fail myself, I was, it's funny. You go, the first couple of Trex decks that were in Northern California were the gas docks at Tahoe. So you go up there, and that's a pretty substantial environment. You got winter, summer, lots of heat, fuel, all this stuff out on this gas dock, plus the thing moving up and down and everything else. You go out on those things, they're 30 years old, they look brand new. Municipality put one in Tahoe City with the newer Trex product. The next summer, it was completely destroyed. So it's like, it was, and mine kind of did the same thing, but it was just kind of one of those things that was kind of interesting to see. So man-made products aren't always there. And then Trex was replacing them. Suit got too big, became class action, then you got pennies on the dollar. So that's where the warranty of the product isn't always what the association thinks you're getting. Anybody that had a Simwood roof or CalShake roof, anybody go through those lawsuits, or Hardy roofs, that was all the big roofing materials, replace the shake. We're California, we like the shake look. All those products failed. And first it was CalShake, that's crap, that failed. Simwood was a new thing, that didn't make it. And then the Hardy shingle came out, and that didn't make it. The siding works well, the roofing product didn't. So it's hard to know. Okay, so rail caps. If you have solid rail walls on your balconies, these are areas where we see a lot of issues, particularly in older developments. The rail caps, put a slope cap on and properly flashed. The quality lumber can like be $18, $20 a foot, and to replace the rail wall underneath it when it rots out, when you've got siding or stucco on both sides, it's a pretty substantial assembly when you're talking about the wall framing, the waterproofing, and then whatever the cladding system is. That could be $100 to $150 a square foot. These are areas. So they put this nice little metal detail on top, and then they just bolted into it. And they didn't seal the holes. So this thing just leaked over the years, and then finally the rail cap is completely dry rotted out. Well, one thing they don't do is they never put any flashing under this wood. This wood cap was supposed to be the flashing. And so what happens is once this starts happening, it starts getting down into the framing below. And so this is a close-up. So this is like a little membrane they should put over the rail wall, and then the caps go on top. And then the other one's the corners. These corners always open up. The wood moves back and forth. People try to caulk it, and they fail. And so we typically usually put in a foil piece of thing that's UV protected. So this opens up. You don't end up with this framing issue where it dry rotts out the corner. Because now you're pulling off all the siding on both sides to replace this dry rotted frame from this little tiny problem. Yes?
Yeah, I don't know why contractors always want to do a 45 because it rots out right at the tip. Why don't they bring it up 2 boards like that? It's a lot better.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but some people don't think it looks as pretty.
Well,
so I know we go through that. Yeah, no, I agree with you. The good news is there are some products out. There's a PVC trim product that we've used now for like 15 years, and actually it's like a PVC pipe where you actually glue the joint together and it solids together. And we've had 0 callbacks on them, and they're wonderful, and they never have to be replaced again. And they're a little bit more expensive than replacing with wood, but it's one of those things when it's done, and you're not coming back to it. So the other thing are the guardrail things too is things like when you're talking about joints and seams. That was good lead-in, thank you. You know, water will just go down in this versus you lap it over so the water runs off and down the railing. So some of it's also just the way it's installed. You install trim and things. These are areas that if I was going to come out and do destructive testing on an older development, I'd probably open a few of these up and take a look at them. See how this is performing. So, okay, so we're going to talk a little about insurance because Darren kind of touched on some of the stuff, and one of the things is I think when you deal with most of your vendors, your landscaper, pool services, you guys get additionally insured endorsements and things like that. But kind of like Darren talked about the insurance for the directors and officers that had an exclusion for probably the most covered type thing, you know, covered type suits where you find out you don't really have any coverage because the policy may exclude. I don't want to go through that. So standard in the industry is your management company is going to go get additionally insured endorsements. And I think for 90% of the stuff you do, that's probably fine. You get into bigger projects, you're probably going to need to either talk to Leslie or talk to your attorney about having a little bit more investigation done on the type of coverage that you're actually getting through your vendors. So, and that's kind of when does it go to the next level of scrutiny? And I think that's kind of where you guys need to look at the liability of the work that you're having done or the service provider that's coming out to do work, even a professional, reserve steady guy, construction manager, all these people need to have insurance. And you need to look farther than just getting deck pages that say they have $2 million of this and $1 million of that, and they have auto and things like that. Because what we're finding is the insurance carriers are getting crafty. And so, you know, they're trying to limit their risk. So they sell policies with exclusions in them, and you don't always get the coverage you think you're going to get. And we're seeing more and more of that, and I was kind of horrified to hear about the directors and officers thing. So that's just another thing where they're getting more crafty, where they're really not selling you what you want. And a lot of times the contractors don't know what they've bought. So you need to really take a harder look into the insurance policies. So here's the kind of exclusions we see, and I think Darren touched a little bit on it. So some contractors will have what they call multifamily exclusions. So it'll just be a line of you're not insured for a multifamily product. So that's going to include condos, senior housing, apartments, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it will be apartments to condo conversions, and sometimes it will say common interest development. These are all things that obviously you don't want to see in your contractor's policies because that means he has no coverage working on your development. To get that exclusion waived for a typical contractor, especially contractor, he's going to spend about $20,000 a year for that policy. So he has to do a fair amount of work in this industry to justify the expense. And I think that's where we get into things. And you're going to typically see these in, especially contractors like concrete companies, you know, marble companies, different things I call specialty trades, HVAC companies, things that they typically don't work in this industry, but every once in a while you're going to call them out to do something. And that's where you're going to find it. And then smaller general contractors won't carry it because it's expensive. The next thing is completed operations insurance. And so this is what that's all about. And probably the most important is when they leave, if they don't have completed operations insurance, as soon as they pull off the job, there's no more insurance coverage.